All right, so I'm going to kick off the day by bringing up Catherine Bracy of TechEquity Collaborative. Let's welcome her up, and Erica Baker of Slack. We're going to chat about rallying the tech industry for good. And just as a side note, we are going to be doing questions and answers throughout the day. And you can submit those questions at slido.com /TCJustice. And yeah, all right, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, awesome to have you here. Yeah. So the tech industry, especially post-Trump, has been very involved in political issues. And last week, Elon Musk of Tesla drew the line when Trump decided to pull out of the climate agreement. Are you surprised, Erica, are you surprised that that was the line for him?
I am not surprised that that was the line for him. That was very expected, but I am disappointed that that was the line for him. There are several places he could have drawn a line with the travel ban, with all the things that Trump said about people of color, just not showing up and supporting Trump to begin with because he's like a horrible human being, right? But Elon Musk decided that he needed to have a seat at the table for whatever reason, I guess assuming that he'd be able to influence Trump, who, by all accounts, even before Elon joined, is not an influenceable person, right?
Right.
And so it's just like there's some level of rationalization, I think, that goes on. And now that Trump has said something or done something that harms Elon's business, he has drawn a line. So very expected, but still disappointing.
Yeah. Catherine, did you think that that would happen sooner, or?
I don't spend a lot of time thinking about Elon Musk's politics, honestly.
That's fair.
I don't know. I mean, I think, people are entitled to support who they want. As someone who would like to see a more progressive tech industry, it's a little disappointing that, as Erica said, I mean, he showed us who he is, and we should have believed him, 2 years ago. So it is heartening now to see that people in tech especially, are starting to really take a stand against Trump and his policies. We're going to need to continue doing that and standing up even stronger in the months and years to come.
Right, I just want to check, can everyone hear Catherine, or is the mic cutting out? Cutting out a bit, okay. Could someone please fix that?
I have another mic.
Oh, what? Where did that come from?
I don't know.
Did someone just speak up while I was... Wow, all right, stealthy. Okay, so meanwhile, in Silicon Valley, Y Combinator's Sam Altman has said that he thinks that someone in Silicon Valley needs to run for governor in California in order to combat Trump. Erica, looks like you think that's a terrible idea.
I think it's a horrible idea.
Why?
Do you see the tech industry?
Oh, I see it.
We know the demographics. We know how people behave in the industry, all the reports, all the stories that come out, like horrible thing after horrible thing. And we want someone who is leading that industry to run a state? I don't think so. I think that we want someone whose job it is to be a politician to continue being a politician.
Right.
Tech people have this idea that they are this sort of belief system, they can fix everything. And I would love to see us sort of disavow ourselves of that notion. We can't fix everything. There are people who have spent their lives, their careers, working on social good, public policy, and it's our job to figure out how we can best support them in doing their jobs. We don't need to be doing their jobs for them.
I heartily agree, and I also think it's just important. I mean, this is sort of a pattern you see in tech where, people who haven't been engaged before stand up and say, oh, well, I need to now be engaged, and the way that I'm going to do that is to run for governor, do the most out in front thing, which is, not that helpful. I would love to see Sam, who really, I believe, deeply, truly cares about these issues, and he cares about making a more progressive tech industry. I'd like to see him, serve on a county commission or, go to hang out at city council meetings.
Right.
And, kind of get a grounding in what that is. I also just don't think that the people who are, it's not like there are like a slate of horrible candidates who are lining up to run for governor of California. So I just don't really. I don't know that there's a lane there. But I appreciate the sentiment, and I would like to see more people in tech figure out how to get involved in a meaningful way in local politics and civic issues generally. And that's why we started the TechEquity Collaborative.
Yeah, what would you like to see specifically from the tech industry at a local level?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think particularly in this moment where a lot of people in tech have gotten activated for the first time in the wake of Trump, if that is something that really raises your passions and is something that, you see what Trump is doing and find that offensive and horrifying and want to do something, it really is incumbent on you as someone who works in an industry that's driving a lot of inequality, especially in our own backyard, to look at what you can do about that, right, in your own communities before we start looking outside of that. So, I mean, the same people who are affected by an immigration ban or are under threat from ICE are also under threat from landlords in East Oakland who are kicking them out of their apartments or can't get a job in the Bay Area because they're pushed out to like Stockton or whatever, and it's not reasonable for them. And so that inequality needs to be tackled, and it's something that people in the Bay Area who work in tech have just not been doing. They're not at the table when it comes to these local issues. And so we started the TechEquity Collaborative to be sort of an organizing body for that energy, because I know it's there, it's just kind of untapped and lying dormant.
Right. I feel like the tech industry views everything as something to be disrupted, right? And so you go in and you disrupt politics. And that's not helpful for anybody. And I would love, as Catherine said, for them to start small at the local level, get an idea of what the real challenges are, how they can solve problems for the people in their neighborhoods, instead of trying to say, oh, we're going to solve problems for the whole state, country, or whatever.
Right. Yeah, that reminds me of that time Shervin Pishavar, was brainstorming on Twitter about, an app to stop police killings of Black people, essentially. And yeah, it's just that idea that the tech industry can solve anything just with some code or whatnot. Right. And it sounds like you all might agree with this, but that there seems to be less accountability on the local level where the industry could potentially be more impactful.
Right, yeah.
So how do we shift the focus?
Well, I mean, I think, one of the reasons I think that tech hasn't been involved in the local level here in the Bay Area is because people who work on the internet tend to think themselves as sort of global citizens or citizens of the web, and they don't. And local politics and issues are just kind of boring and dry. And so it's not, they don't see exciting problems there to be solved, and they don't think of themselves as sort of identifying primarily as a resident or citizen of this place. A lot of us are new to the Bay Area. And so it's just not an obvious thing for people to get excited about. But honestly, right now, if you care about national issues of injustice and inequality, you must be looking at cities and local decision makers as the place to exert influence right now.
Right.
I think housing is a global issue. If we don't fix housing, then I personally think that's the second most important justice issue right now. I mean, Oakland has lost 25% of its Black population since 2000. That's a housing issue. That's a justice issue. Yeah, and it's something that we should care about.
Right. I agree with that. I think that if you can solve the local housing issues, then I believe you are ready to maybe think about running for governor, right? That is a huge problem. And if you have all the ideas and have the solutions, then solve that. Return the place that you came and inflicted your violence upon. Return it to the way it was, make it so that people don't have to keep leaving their homes that they've been in for decades, that they can afford to continue living in the Bay Area or the cities that they've been in for so long that tech keeps pushing them out of. Like, if you can solve that problem, if you can figure out how to influence local politicians such that they will approve, building multi-use housing and, different sorts of housing all over the Bay, then I believe in your ability to be a politician. But start small. Start there.
Yeah, Catherine, I know that you've had many conversations with Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf. What are those conversations like? And are you seeing any movement in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a supporter of Mayor Schaaf's, which is like a very radical thing to say. So status quo. But I think these issues, like I said, are kind of, I mean, if we're speaking about housing in particular, there's nothing that one city can do to fix the housing crisis. It's a regional issue. So we need, and it's not enough for Oakland to be very, to be kind of encouraging affordable housing development and anti-displacement. If Brisbane and Palo Alto and these other cities are going to be really regressive when it comes to housing justice. So a lot of it is out of her hands. I think she has done a laudable job and when it comes to talking about housing issues, and I know that her heart's in the right place on it, but we need a regional strategy. And if this speaks to tech people, like, we need a moonshot on housing, and it can't just be in the hands of a mayor of San Francisco or a mayor of Oakland or even the governor of California. It's got to be a much more sort of consensus-based grassroots movement, and tech has outsized political power and privilege that they don't put to use on this issue in particular, and I'd like to see them come to the table on that.
I wonder how big of a reach the tech industry has, and I wonder if we in the tech industry think that the reach is larger than it actually is.
I think we do. I think that there are certain members of the tech industry, people who sit on executive levels or sit in executive level positions or board positions at some of the larger tech companies, might have more reach than the rest of us do, and that's just in the political level, just being able to go sit at a table with Donald Trump.
Right.
But the majority of us don't have that sort of reach, but we have this sort of big, because we see so much press about ourselves, and
right.
We live in sort of this echo chamber. We believe that we're like the world. We're really just a small little microcosm of the world that only has reach and influence with the folks in our bubble.
I don't know. I think I disagree with that.
Yeah?
I think we have a lot of power.
We have power, but reach?
I don't know what that. Well, what do you mean by reach? Like.
Yeah, in terms of reaching the people in Middle America. I was talking to one of the editors here at TechCrunch, and he's in Michigan, and he's like, people there don't care about the tech industry.
Exactly.
Maybe they've heard of Zuckerberg, but Elon Musk, who's that? Why does it matter what he
Just
thinks?
Because they haven't heard of him doesn't mean they're not,
being impacted,
exerting influence over their livelihood. So I think, it sort of depends on what you mean. From the perspective of, economic impact, I think that, obviously someone in Michigan is not going to be concerned about, Tesla or Facebook. I don't know how many jobs they have in Michigan, but I can guarantee you they're dwarfed in comparison to how many jobs, Ford or Chrysler is creating. I grew up outside Detroit, so. But at the same time, it's a little bit dangerous that tech is exerting so much influence on people's lives, and A, that people don't know it, and B, that we don't see that we are intrinsically, our fates are intrinsically linked. So, when TechEquity Collaborative launched as a result, in part, of Uber announcing they were moving to Oakland, and the response being almost uniformly negative.
Right.
And as someone, again, who grew up outside of Detroit in the 80s, if a company had announced they were moving thousands of high-paying jobs to an economically depressed city, we would have thrown a parade for them at the time. And so the question of how we have everyday Americans don't see the industry that is really building the future, whether, not just in tech, but in every other industry as well, as sort of a value add or a partner or something that can create broad-based middle-class opportunity. That's really dangerous.
So why do you think that there was such a negative reaction to Uber's presence in Oakland?
Because tech has not, particularly in this region, has not really created a lot of opportunity for people who aren't going to work at a tech company, right? Like, we need to diversify the industry, but also recognize that the jobs that are created as sort of indirect outcomes of economic growth are not accessible to people here because we have no economic resiliency. People can't stay close enough to the Bay Area to take advantage of the growth while the growth is actually happening. That's largely due to housing. Like, the fact that, restaurants are closing in San Francisco because they can't hire dishwashers, that's a really terrifying sign for, for people who care about a sustainable economy. So when, it's totally rational response for people in Oakland to say, oh God, so really what tech coming to town means for me is just displacement.
Exactly. My feeling when Uber announced that they are opening an office in Oakland was that the entirety of the area that they were going to occupy, the whole downtown area of Oakland, was going to change drastically. And everything within like maybe a mile radius was going to change drastically. House prices were going to go up. The businesses you see on the block were going to change. Everything was going to change about Oakland, and nothing was going to include Oakland. There was a time when Uber had an opportunity to sort of reach out to the community and try to get involved with TechEquity, and they chose not to, which is a pretty strong sign that they didn't have Oakland's best interests at heart. And so I was very anti-Uber moving to Oakland, and when they announced that they weren't going to do as much of push into Oakland as they planned to, I was very excited.
So what that says about the long-term health of the economy in the Bay Area should really worry policymakers for sure, and it should worry people at the top and the tech industry because, this is not a sustainable economy for them to be building companies in.
Right. So what's your plan moving forward?
So we want to organize tech workers who believe that the tech-driven economy in the Bay Area can and should work for everyone, to advocate for policy issues, housing justice, workforce development, access to technology, that we think are gonna make that vision possible, make it possible that tech-driven growth creates opportunity for everyone. And we see this untapped political power in the tech community. That's sort of a separate dynamic from the political power of tech companies. I think the emergence of the tech worker as a political constituency is a really interesting phenomenon right now. But there's no flag for them to rally around. There's no sort of political identity or sort of channel for that energy to really be put in the right direction. And so that's what we're trying to create with the TechEquity Collaborative. So all of you should join. TechEquityCollaborative.org/join. We launched in late April, but we're already working on an anti-displacement campaign coalition in East Oakland. If any of you live in Oakland, Erica, you should call your city council people and tell them to include the anti-displacement funding in the city's budget that needs to be passed by June 30th. That's my plug. So these are the concrete ways that we're developing for members of the tech community to really use their power to create economic justice in the Bay Area.
Catherine, you use the word organize, which when people hear the word organize in relationship to people doing jobs usually makes them think of unions. Is TechEquity going to head in that direction at any point?
No, I mean, there are groups like the Tech Worker Coalition and Silicon Valley Rising and Tech Solidarity. I think we're going to hear from Derek.
Yeah, Silicon Valley Rising will be here later.
That are looking at tech workers and their ability to influence decision makers in companies, right? And that's a very important lever of power, right?
Totally.
But we want to look at tech workers in their role as citizens of this place and how they can exert influence on decision makers. So, we started by organizing companies and realized that we can only get so far in solving this problem by getting companies to change their behavior. And while that's necessary, if we're going to solve the housing crisis, we need policymakers to change their behavior. And so it's incumbent on us to see our power as citizens, not just as employees.
And Erica, I realize that you're an engineer at Slack. Activism is not your full-time job, but I see you as someone as being like very politically active and aware. So what are some of your goals moving forward?
My goal, one of my biggest goals moving forward, this is not as important or broad as what Catherine is working on. I think that her tech equity is one of the biggest and most important things that people in the tech industry could be focusing on. My goal is to sort of continue advocating for the voices of people in tech. I'm sort of a storyteller, and so I would like to lift up the voices of those who have stories who don't feel comfortable sharing those stories. And just, if we can sort of bring those stories to light and kind of force leaders in the tech industry to understand that there's a huge level of inequality and inequity that they need to work on, I think that we can see some change, some important changes. So I'd keep doing that.
All right, great, thanks. Well, we are unfortunately out of time, but thank you so much for joining me up here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks, y'all.